So yeah, as you can see there, despite them going a number of rounds, very few punches landed from either man. So not the most thrilling fight to watch, I've got to say, particularly in the UK where it was 1:30 a.m., something like that, when the fight reached its conclusion. I was definitely struggling to keep my eyes open by this point. And then you see them throwing very few punches and even fewer, minuscule amount of high impact blows or power punches, you might call them. Wilder actually outthrew Zhilei Zhang, but a lot of Wilder's shots were kind of half jabs, feints more than anything else. And then, yeah, you've got the pressure there. It was obviously Zhang was the man coming forward. Wilder's trying to box off the back foot, which a lot of times we've seen work. You know, he lures people into that big right hand. And Zhang said in his post-fight interview that he did feel a number of Wilder's shots that he does hit hard, but it wasn't anything he couldn't deal with. And as Eamon pointed out, Zhang had that massive weight advantage, which certainly probably helped him to absorb a lot of the shots. And I'm not sure Wilder ever got completely set. I think Wilder, as we saw against Fury in the second and third fights, is less effective when his space is cut down. He's a leverage puncher, if you like. He's got those long arms. He likes to throw looping, arcing shots, which make the most of that momentum. So yeah, a bit of a drab fight as it turned out, but one in which you would have still backed Wilder, because if there's not much going on, you back the guy who's got that one punch conclusive knockout power usually. And I know Zhang's a big hitter in his own right, but he sets his shots up usually. You know, even in the Joyce fight, you saw him, you know, either throw a feint or a setup shot before landing that big, you know, finishing blow. But Wilder just never seemed to be completely motivated. He seemed frustrated. He seemed bothered, not least by the ending, of course, when he was complaining to the referee when he got hit with that final shot. Obviously, no excuses there. You've got to protect yourself at all times. He didn't seem particularly aggrieved by the mistake after the fight. But yeah, I mean, Eamon, is this as much a fight that Wilder lost as Zhang won, or are we not giving, or am I not giving Zhang enough credit?
No, I think Zhang's got to take the credit here. I feel that Wilder landed his biggest punch or his big punches here, and Zhang just walked through it. And the moment I saw that happen, I was like, well, even Zhang tiring isn't really going to do much more, because he's still able. It would take a real crazy Zhang onslaught for him to really tire and Wilder to tag him with something big, and I just didn't see that happening. Zhang's got too much nous as a boxer. Even though he has tired, I think he'd know to conserve his tank, especially with how he depleted so much in the latter half of his fight with Joe Parker. So that was never going to happen here. I think Zhang boxed a good fight, a smart fight. But I also just think as well, too, when you've had a blueprint so widely shown, those three Fury fights, no one in the boxing sphere has missed those three Fury Wilder fights. Notably, the heavyweights will all have watched that, especially the top level heavyweights will be thinking, I might be in with Wilder in the future. They'll have seen those three fights. They'll have seen the way Fury come back after a 12th round knockdown, and then the way he then implemented his game plan in the second and third fight, and seeing, look, this is the way to beat Deontay Wilder. This is what I do. Luis Ortiz was sort of onto it, but he was a bit too much off of the offense than how Fury kind of took it to that next level. So that's all that Joe Parker did, really. And it was blamed on ring rust. It was blamed on lack of activity. I don't think Deontay Wilder can really look at this as a lack of activity. Might he look to an excuse? There's some whispers around about maybe Zhang stepped on his foot, but that's all part of the boxing game, isn't it? If that's one of the reasons, that's another bit of experience as well, too. Nothing to really claim anything further than that. You got knocked out. That's what happened there. And look, Zhang got the win. I would like to remember as well, Deontay Wilder, even with all the hurt that he's received in the last few fights specifically, he always seems to, well, pretty much always seems to get back up. Even in this last fight with Zhang, he ended the fight on his feet, and he didn't stay down on the canvas. And I think that shows his true heart, his true willingness to, even if there's doubts about him, still being in boxing, he still took that fight and still wanted to take it, even if it was for big money. And I think that's got to be commended and saluted from a Wilder perspective. But this was just a brilliant victory for Zhilei Zhang. Whether or not it's a faded Wilder, I think actually, even to be fair, like if this was if you want to say the prime Deontay Wilder, maybe 4, 5, 6 years ago, I think the same outcome would have happened.
We'll go back to assessing Wilder's overall legacy. If he does intend to call it a day, we're not certain on that either way. But let's go to the chat. DB Cooper 1 says, bloody hell, Flexon. Calm down on the spelling. Some of us work in finance. We're not all BTEC boxing journalists or editors. Surely working in finance, you need to be able to spell. I would imagine that's still a key part of what you do when you're sending emails and contracts, for example. And as for BTEC, mate, I've got a degree. Yes, it's in American Studies. Yes, it's from Brunel, but still, it's a degree. FNOR says Wilder should fight Joyce, and if he can't knock him out, then retire. Yeah, I'm not sure if that should be the barometer. Hasn't Joyce got like a thicker skull than most people or something? That's not a knock, by the way. That's an actual fact.
Let me tell you something, Danny. That was a fight that was actually very much bandied about, that Wilder versus Joyce fight. And I think that's when that might have been in the back of my mind when I said Wilder maybe not to retire and Wilder not to close the door just yet. That might be the fight as well too, and that fight might likely happen in the UK as well. And that's one of those fights where, from a promotional point of view, even though us boxing fans would know it wouldn't be the case, you could then say for the winner, you could shout out that they're back. Joyce, the immovable object, is back. Deontay Wilder with his big blunt force power is back, because that fight isn't ending on points. So that's a very good shout out there. And that is a fight before. This is why I was a little bit surprised that the Zhang fight was announced, because I thought they were making that one. But that's a very logical step from whoever put that forward.
Mark Martin says, salute to the Bronze Bomber. He's not the same fighter anymore, and things can get very dangerous for him. Needs something other than the right hand. Once that's taken away, there is nothing left. Nothing left. I like it. Very good. FNOR, inactivity killed him. No timing, no precision. He just feels rusty. Tushin Rance, he was never that good, guys. It really makes me laugh hearing all these people talk about the old Wilder who KO'd Journeyman. We'll be talking about his legacy shortly. Mark Martin, Wilder didn't use a meaningful jab. That pouring made it easier to time it. Agreed. Les Tweet says the next 5 versus 5 should all be in the ring at the same time, including promoters. I mean, I think Frank's probably feeling pretty cocky at the moment. He could get the job done in any setting. Leroy Vassell says, I would love to see Wilder retire from the sport of boxing. He's had a stellar career. It is time to enjoy his life and family. Where are we? Richard Smith, you can't completely write him off. Everybody was telling Joshua to hang up his gloves after Usyk, and he's slowly getting back to having his name in the mix again. I don't think that's quite the same. I think Joshua still had plenty of opportunities to be in huge fights, to compete, to win. Where I think Wilder's a lot lower ebb now than Joshua was after he lost to the best fighter in the world twice. Jack Dutton says, why did Turkey El Sheikh tweet after the Dubois beat Hrgovic that if Wilder won, he would fight AJ in September? I think Wilder fighting AJ in September was always the number one choice from Turkey and the guys out in Saudi. I think that's the biggest money fight, particularly for the Saudi market. But it was always another an alternative for the winner of Dubois and Hrgovic to fight AJ for the IBF belt. DB Cooper one's talking about how he hates his job. Would have been a boxer, but he tore his ACL. Very good. Tushin Rance, Turkey was visibly upset when Wilder lost. He wanted him versus Joshua. Also, he was in Wilder's dressing room hyping him up. Yeah, I suggest Turkey gives up being a hype man then, because it clearly didn't work, because Wilder didn't seem particularly motivated at any point in the Zhang fight. But yeah, Wilder's legacy, I mean, it's a tricky one, because if you look at his bare kind of stats on box rec and so on, he hasn't beaten many world-class heavyweights, if any. It depends on your view of Luis Ortiz, I suppose, because that's his best wins. Gave Fury a very hard first and third fight, but got absolutely drubbed in the second. Was a world champion and reigned for a long time, but his roster of challengers was pretty disappointing overall. But do we judge Wilder for something that goes beyond bare stats, in the fact that he was the biggest puncher of his era? He was someone who transcended the sport with that knockout power, a very engaging personality, and showed no fear. You know, he went in there with Fury even after he'd been destroyed in the second fight and made a go of it in the third. He was willing to go and fight a peak Alexander Povetkin over in Russia before the opponent, in that case, tested positive for, I think it was meldonium. And that fight was called off. But he was more than happy to board that plane to Russia when no one really wanted to go out and face Povetkin in his native land. So do we judge Wilder of what he's meant for the heavyweight division, being that American heavyweight during a pretty good era and being the biggest puncher, a chilling knockout artist?
Yeah, look, I don't think you're going to have Deontay Wilder in your top 5 or top 10 heavyweights throughout history. I don't think that's his place in terms of his legacy. I think his legacy comes out a little bit further when you kind of look at the recent years of the heavyweight division. You know, Tyson Fury spoke about the heavyweight division being boring for many years as Vladimir and Vitaly reigned for a number of years. And it was boring in those years. And on the UK side, it took, you know, Fury to go over there and, you know, displace Vladimir of his titles. Fury then went absent and AJ came in and brought back the excitement. And on the other side of the Atlantic, it was Wilder doing the similar sort of same thing. Sure, he might not have had the opposition in front of him that really gave him a bit of a challenge, but he brought that excitement with the right hand, which is a feared and fearsome right hand. It's one of those right hands where you would put him in those fantasy matchups and say, like, how would this right hand had a fared against someone like a George Foreman or an Ernie Shavers or something or someone of that ilk, Mike Tyson. You'd want to talk about those fantasy matchups. When it comes to those, Wilder definitely has a place in that, so he definitely won't be forgotten. And if this was a different decade, Deontay Wilder would be a real, true mainstream star over in America as well. It's just a shame that, you know, boxing hasn't got its place as much as it used to, off of the back of, you know, it, you know, not being one of the more favored sports anyways in over in America. But I think Deontay Wilder, you know, you got to look at his achievements, and to get to where he was and to have his reign and to win a world title and to have a bronze medal as well too in the Olympics off of the back of really limited amateur pedigree. I think he's had a brilliant career and he's incredibly ambassadorial. He speaks very well about the sport. I'm not much of a social commentator, but if you want to look at it this way as well too, he speaks about you know, the need to be a man about things in both the positive macho way and also looking at the negatives and being vulnerable, which hasn't been spoken about too. You've seen this man be open and honest about some of the dangers and how it affects him and how he feels about it. And I think that's been really important to look at that, and really important that he's given that time to speak about, you know, things that don't get discussed as well too. So I really kind of credit Deontay Wilder for being a credit of the sport. He also has to take some negative jabs as well too with some of the lines he's come out with. It's gotten to the point of it being boring, but when we're looking to promote boxing as well too, talking about wanting a body on the record isn't the best of things to say sometimes as well, and that's not something that I condone either. But on the whole, I think he's been someone who has brought real excitement in years when there hasn't been that excitement. It's just a real shame when you talk about legacy that one big fight has escaped him, and both Eddie Hearn and both Shelley Finkel will have to take some portion of the blame. We won't know the truth as to what really happened on there, but for Anthony Joshua and Deontay Wilder to have not fought once in what now would be, if they were to face such a reduced, such a shadow of a fight now, is a real shame that fight never came to materialize when it should have happened for Undisputed those many years ago. And that will also be part of his legacy as well too.